So I'm Allison Doucette. I'm Director of Data and Analytics for Teachscape, which basically means I'm responsible for coming up with our data, our reporting database. There's actually going to be 2 of them, and our whole reporting architecture and tools that we use. So we're gradually going along, and I'll try to give you some ideas of how we're progressing with this. And it tends to follow the demand of what happens in a school district in a given year. So just to quickly go through, there's essentially, as you know, 3 major products in Teachscape. One is Focus, and Focus is essentially observer training. Reflect, which is evaluation, and then Learn, which is in professional development. So I'm going to go through this slide deck here and show you some reports for Focus, just to give you an idea of what you can get about observer training. And then I'll show you a little bit about what you can get from the evaluation tools, and then a little bit about what you can get from professional development. And I'll try to break out where we are in the tools that we're using a little bit, just to give you an idea of how this works. And then I'll actually go in live into most of Reflect, because that's where most of our analytical tools are right now. And I'll give you some idea of where everything sits. I tend to talk a little bit fast because I grew up in New York City, so please do me a favor. In the chat window, which I think Jan can see, type in a message either for me or Pam, and that will force me to slow down. Are we good?
We're good.
Okay. So Focus, again, we're looking a lot of the what types of reports do we have relative to observer training. What people are generally looking for observer training is how close are the observers to actually what an expert rater would do. So there's something that's related to the initial testing part. And then you can look at, are there particular components where there's a big range of variability. So maybe everybody's really good on certain sections of the classroom environment, but they vary a lot relative to instruction. So you can look at that way. And that's the initial certification process for observers. And there's a fair number of reports that are built around that, and we can look at those. Then we start getting into calibration. So what we've heard from ETF, Educational Testing Services, is that during the school year, after people have been certified, they probably should have some check-ins just to see if people are kind of drifting away from the original training. And this is a shorter thing, so we can look at what calibration reports look like. And then there's recertification, which is something that happens, and that does depend on a lot on different state regulations, where people don't do the entire test in the beginning again, but they essentially recertify, which is a much more formal process and kind of calibrating and saying, okay, are we all in the same place pretty much during the school year? So what they look like, what you see if you go in as an administrator of the system and start looking at agreement on scoring practice, you can look at different levels, what percentage are agreeing with the master scores. You can look at, and this varies between the administrators and the actual observers do, but you can actually see how to interpret the report if you passed or didn't pass, and what people's recommendations were during that process. You can see how, if you're an administrator, you can see how different people performed and which areas they had difficulty in. When you get to actually, when you're looking across, you can actually see across the board how are we doing in our district. Oh, sorry there, a little fast on the mouse. So if people are doing well, not doing well, what are the components that we see when people are doing this certification process that we're doing really well and we have a lot of consistency in the process, and where is there a great variation? Then we start looking at calibration, and again, calibration is something that generally happens periodically during the school year, and it's just a check-in. It tends to be a very short process, and sometimes done by individuals and sometimes done as part of a PD session for administrators. It does vary by different districts, but it helps people get a sense of, okay, I did my initial training, and now am I going back to some biases that I may have had in the past on the way I look at things, and sort of do a check-in. Then we can actually calibrate and see how people are doing and where they are in that process. So how far, if you set a calibration window, so you can set up to 5 during a school year, but you can just do 1, 2 as well. You can see how many people have actually started this process and where they are. And again, this can be as formal as showing actual how people did, or just showing everybody just did their calibration window. And this is something that just depends, again, on a given district culture. And then there's actual coaching, so somebody can view a video and actually coach somebody who's having issues in certain areas of calibration. And then again, for recertification, we have a series of reports for that as well. These reports are essentially built into the administrative platform. They tend to be fairly static. In other words, there's a couple of pull downs, but that's pretty much what it is. They're not really what we call our analytical reports. We've done most of creating analytical reports where you drag and drop and export and change things out. We're doing those first in Reflect because that seems to be the greatest demand, and then we'll be working on doing the same types of analytical reports, which I'm going to be showing you next for Focus and for Learn. So we started doing a lot more analytical reports in Reflect because that's where people really are looking at how we're doing on evaluations and what can we see or learn from what we're seeing from those particular scores, whether it's just figuring out where people are in the process or actually often looking at either how can we improve our professional development so that teachers in certain areas of weaknesses, maybe it's by school or by district, how can we provide additional PD that's related to that? Or sometimes it's a situation of really sitting down with an individual teacher and saying, you know, this is where you're getting better, this is where you're staying flat, and here's some ways that you could improve either with professional development or additional coaching. Particularly brand new teachers, sometimes coaching is a way to go. So the first report that we were asked for is started last year. We worked with school districts on what they were most likely to need, and the first one was, are we done? People wanted to know where they were in the process and whether they had completed everything given the deadlines that they were given. So this is essentially more of a compliance report, but it does give you an idea of where you are. So you could see at the district level, or actually depending on how you configured this at the state level, if that's something that was set up that way, you can see what percentage of observations have been completed, and by school you can see that. Or you could actually break it out by workflow. Maybe it's a situation where your teachers are all done and you have different deadlines for your specialists, or you have different deadlines for administrative evaluations. You could look at those separately and pick those out and say, I just want to see how we're doing on these particular different types of evaluations. So first question we got was, are we done? The next thing we got was, well, if we're not done, where do we stand? Where are we in that process? And so this report essentially shows you by school or by observer or by teacher how many observations have yet to been started at this school, how many have been completed, how many have been confirmed. Or you could see by a teacher, if you say every teacher needs to have 3, or every teacher of this type, for instance, needs to have 3 observations, you can say, well, this teacher looks like maybe this is a non-tenured teacher and this is a tenured teacher. In some states this does vary. You could have a situation where in here you can see this person's completely done, whereas these 2 teachers here have not had any observations done yet this year. So first question is, are we done? Second is, if we're not done, where do we stand in the processes? And it's somewhat compliance driven, but with different deadlines that are published by districts, this is often very helpful. The next thing goes along into looking at the scores, and this is where it starts talking about driving professional development. How are we doing by the different components, percentage-wise, where are our scores, where are our strengths and weaknesses, percentage-wise across the district. And this report really shows you this. I mean, it shows you for given domains, you know, where's our strength, and this is obviously this district is strongest in the classroom environment, and looks like weakest or sort of a tie-up between instruction and planning and preparation. And then you can see real strength, creating an environment of respect and rapport. But down here you can see not so strong in questioning and discussion techniques. So this is essentially one way of looking at percentages. And this could be done by a school, or you can actually select and drill in a certain domain. The next thing starts drilling down a little bit more into an individual. Well, what about a given teacher? Now, I've seen like strengths and weaknesses, but what about a teacher? What can we help a teacher out with understanding where their strengths and weaknesses were? And I don't know how familiar you are with this concept of a tree map, but essentially is a box that shows you your strengths, which are darkest color green in this case, and areas that you need to work on or have not been, you know, not had very good scores in these other areas. And so it breaks out showing you the numbers of observations, and you can set a threshold saying, don't even show me this if there's only been one observation, because I want to make sure I see at least two before I have a conversation with somebody about this type of thing. But this actually gives you strengths and weaknesses. But that's a snapshot of essentially averages across observations. And in some cases, you want to do a little bit more than that and say, is the teacher improving? Are there areas where the teacher is doing better? Or are there areas that there's not a lot of improvement, and where could professional development be provided for that? So this report we added recently. It's an individual progress report. So for a given teacher, you can pull up for each component over their observation where you can see improvement or things staying about the same. So these are the reports we put in for analytical, and I'll go in and drill into them a little bit more live as we go forward. But these are the types of things that we saw districts asking for and trying to understand more about. Additional things we've been asked about since then have been more related to actual inter-rater reliability in actuality. So we have been hearing from districts that we did all that calibration, but now what's it actually look like in practice? Are our scores varying dramatically? And particularly in states where they require more than one observer of a teacher, they want to see are those observers getting similar scores, or is a big variation? So quick deep breath here. Questions so far? I know I've kind of rolled through those before I've got, and then I was going to go into something more live. I was going to do the other two products and then move on. Questions?
Do we currently have these reports available? Are these being built?
No, these reports, it depends on whether they've been turned on for your school district or not. These reports are all live. So, for instance, Milwaukee can run all of these reports right now because they've been turned on for them and the data is all there. You may not see them. If there's no scores, nothing's going to show up on the screen where there's no scores. So it does depend. Yes?
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, these are all live. None of these are in development. These are out there in production. We have not rolled them out to every district in the country because we were trying to do it in such a way that we have some training and that there's more people who can support them. But people who've been using the software since the beginning of the school year, a lot of them have these reports running. But they've been in production for a long time.
Thank you.
So the other aspect of things is walkthroughs. I don't know how many people in Wisconsin use walkthroughs, but the concept of walkthroughs is that you do a short survey, walk through your schools, looking for usually what's the effect of our professional development, or what are we seeing relative to initiatives that we see. And a typical example would be, we focus a lot in our schools on small group work. We want to limit the amount of teacher-directed instruction. We want more student engagement. We want whatever particular things, or people are looking, we've just added some walks for some of the Common Core. People are looking for, when they walk through math classrooms or ELS classrooms, ELA classrooms, are they actually seeing people doing the things that are part of the Common Core standards? So that's a different approach. That's more curriculum-based versus pedagogically based, but essentially they're similar things. Are we actually doing what we say that we want to do? And it's different than an observation where you're actually targeting performance of a given teacher. This is more a survey across the entire school and district. So in this situation, the first thing is essentially you can look and see which of the walkthroughs that you've put out there are being used and which schools they're being used in, and get an idea of how they're being used. So this is basically somewhat just of a usage. Are we using our walkthroughs, and are schools actually doing anything with them?
And by walkthrough, you do mean surveys, right?
Yeah, they're surveys. Essentially, yeah. I mean, they're really surveys. They're walkthrough surveys. It's completely different because you're basically looking at the same questions across the school. So an example on usage is just to see if you're doing them. But if you were looking at by observer, you can see how many walks a given person has done, which are really just surveys. And then you can also look at the data themselves and start seeing, what are we seeing here? In the walks, if we've done 5 walks, and what percentage of our walks, essentially, what number of them have we seen these actual things that we say that we want to be able to do? So this is an example of looking at the classroom environment. and looking at particular things that we say we do or do not see in particular types of questions. So again, we have these sort of standard classroom walkthroughs, which are basically built somewhat around the Danielson rubric, although not directly on the Danielson rubric. And then we also have ones that we've developed for the different Common Core. Given the amount of professional development materials that have been put into the Learn product, people are actually looking and saying, okay, now we're doing all these initiatives around the Common Core. Are we actually seeing those being implemented in the classroom? So the next thing, we've done our walks. We've said, oh, we see these things, and we want to get an idea of what types of reports can we run out of our professional development system. In those cases, you can see how many courses are people enrolled in, how many have been completed. Again, you can run a transcript off for a given teacher. Within the Learn product, there's also a concept of professional learning communities. So you can see for a given individual what communities have they participated in, what types of posts are existing in those communities. And some people use professional learning communities around large district initiatives where they're saying we're going to have a Common Core or just a high school math community. In some cases, we actually see professional learning communities being used as small coaching environments where somebody's got a particular person they want to set up a plan for, and they want to create this very small little world where they can actually do their coaching and include both conversations and professional development in it. And then you can see if you've assigned goals. In other words, if you set up something where managers being principals or assistant principals are managing someone's learning, and you have targeted a certain number of courses to be completed, then you can actually see how well that went, and you can actually see how much time was actually spent. There's a whole bunch more reports in here, but these are the ones that we see most actively used in the system. So this is an example of who's enrolled in something. This shows you courses. When did they start? When did Judy start these courses? When did they finish? If there's assessments, some of our courses have assessments at the end of them. Some of them don't. If they do have assessments, then you'll actually see a score here. You can see history of a given learner. What have they done when they did it, and you can get a complete background on what they've done. And then you can see engagement. How many? Because this is again along the lines of doing some sort of communities. How many contributors have there been? What types of members are there in our different types of communities? Again, more plan information. In the words, you created warning plans. How many items are in the plans? How many have been completed? How are they working on these plans? And this could be something that's for a new teacher. It could be somebody who's on an improvement plan, or it could be something just across the school district who said we want everybody to complete these particular modules during the school year. And then goal completion, what's happened for this person, how far are they on that process as far as completing what they're supposed to get done. And then actual time spent, how much actual time have they spent in each of these things. And again, one of the things that's in there is we try as much as possible to capture real elapsed time, but it is possible to just keep pushing the button every once in a while and make soup, but theoretically people are actually learning in this process. So that was a look at sort of a PowerPoint slide of that. Any questions so far on that? I know I went fairly quickly.
I think we're good.
Okay, so now I'm going to log in as Sam Superintendent, because every superintendent is named Sam.
Yeah, I might have missed something. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you just look at can you show me the reports in Learn again?
Sure. Let's just scroll down here. Learn. Yeah, so these
Of accessing them? They're under search reports, is that what you went to?
Yeah. You need to have the role of alternate manager to be able to search the reports, and then you will see them in there. And they do need, we did learn recently that they don't run that wonderfully in Chrome, but they work really well in Firefox.
So if if I click on the search button, a bunch of reports show up.
Right, I'll do that right now. Here we go. So I'm going to bring this over. I'll switch around a little bit. So here you are, right, and you see a bunch of, this is actually the learning, but I could go in as, where am I? I'm logged in as Tim. I've got to see where my manager. I don't think I've set myself up with this one. Yeah, right in here. Am I in? I might already be in as this. So my learning, Sam Central. Yeah, I'm not at the right person to do the managing my team's learning, but yeah, you can run the reports from here. I'm sorry, this is an example of what you're saying. Yeah, you go in. Sorry, I just literally I delayed and did something else. But yeah, you go in. You have the manager role. You change your role to being to the team view, and once you're in the team view, you run the reports. And it is interesting. The way you run a report is search, and then you find report, and then you execute. And I did learn that you really do want to run these in Firefox, but you can run all those reports if you have the role in our system of either manager or alternate manager.
Yeah, I just tried to generate a report and it says it wouldn't work in Safari.
Yeah, we've had some browser issues, and it seems to be, I don't quite know what they all are. So when I have done this, when I run reports, I shouldn't say this. I should say run in any browser. I just pull up Firefox.
Is the chart of the reports, and because the titles of the reports aren't like self-explanatory. You showed us that little grid that had the description of what the reports were. Is that grid in that?
Yeah,
that grid under that yeah.
Yeah.
Where do I find that grid?
You know, I need to get you some better info. I am not a Learn expert, to be honest with you, but I can get you something like that that will give you a little bit more help on what these reports actually give you. Because yeah, I can do that. The other aspect of things is that we are working. This is one of our initiatives. Is that the Learn reports that are in there? They're crystal reports, and you have some pull downs, but you don't have a lot of analytical functionality. So one of the things we're working on this spring into the summer is the reports that you see in Reflect. We're going to have similar analytical reports for both Focus and Learn because you can do a lot more with them. I mean, what you're running there is essentially just a crystal report, which is pretty locked, and you don't have a lot of ability to manipulate the data. But if you've been in Reflect, which I think you might have been, you know that we can you can export it to Excel. You can filter things. You could change things around a lot more. So that's something we're working on. So these static reports will still exist and Learn, but we're trying to get to a point where you're able to do more analytical reporting with that data. And I will try to get you something better as far as descriptors for the Learn reports, because I know we have something. I just don't have it on me right now. And who asked for that? I'm sorry. Is that James?
That's James Edler from Milwaukee.
Okay. So I will get something for that, and I'll get you that, Pam, so you can get it to him.
Yes, that's fine.
Because I know we have something like that. I used to have it, but I haven't been working with Learn in a while since I left working permanently in customer sites. So I thought I'd walk through a little bit in the types of things that you can see live, right, as far as the analytical reports. And this is probably very familiar to Milwaukee, but not so familiar to everyone else. So Milwaukee, bear with us. I think you've seen these all before, but we'll try to cover as much as we can. So again, if you're looking at walkthroughs, you can look at a walkthrough usage report, and you can see how many walks have been done by types of surveys. And bear with me, I'm doing this from my home internet, so I'm sure it's faster in your school buildings than it is in my house. Assuming I still have Wi-Fi here, because Comcast drops all the time. Yeah, there we go. All right, so you can see here, we can see the number of walks by school, and we could choose different surveys if we loaded them. So if you were looking at pedagogy, you might be looking at this way. If you wanted to see things by the Common Core, you could pull one of the Common Core walks across. And this is just really counting, and you can see how many walks by observer or by school. We could look at the actual data. Again, we saw this before. So we're in here and we're seeing that you know, certain areas are being done or not done within a particular school district. So you can see here that we've done looks like 8 walks, which is pretty much, and you can see in some areas we're seeing a lot of the things we're looking for. We're not seeing that much. We're actually seeing a lot of explaining and modeling procedures and not too much presenting content, so that's good. We got a lot of energy, enthusiasm. So we can go through each of these and filter this down a little bit more. That's really this walk survey. As far as completion, where do we stand for the school year? This is really the one that as the school year draws to an end, people start running quite a bit because they're trying to figure out if everyone has actually been observed the number of times they are supposed to be observed. So again, this is going to do a little work. And in here you can see that each of these reports has a description of what it does. It makes some suggestions on what to work for and gives you some ideas of what to think about. So this shows you by the entire district or by each of the schools in the district what percentage of the observations have been done. Another example would be the activity. Remember we talked about, now you know that and you're like, wow, what happened to West Haven or whatever school you're looking at. You now want to see what's the status of all of them. So you can see here, and again, this could be by different evaluations. You might want to look just at the specialists or just at the administrators if you're observing administrators, and you can see that what percent, you can see the same number, but again down here you can see by school, you can see some schools have done quite a few observations and completed them, and some of them have done a lot of scheduling and there's a lot in progress, but they haven't actually completed. So this gives you a little bit more granularity on that. And you could do this by observer or you could do it by teacher. So if you're looking in a particular district, which teachers, you know, if they're all green all the way across, you know you're done for that particular teacher. Another type of what we start getting into is scores. How are we doing scoring-wise? So if you're looking at scores, this is, again, sort of a distribution. It's a percentage distribution, so it's not counting. Now it's essentially percentages. And in here you can see, we can see the particular score distribution and see that the strengths are actually in professional responsibilities and we're not doing as well in the classroom environment. So it does, this gives you some signs, and then if it's within the classroom environment, well, okay, where is it that we really need to pay attention? It looks like you're creating an environment of respect and rapport might be one of them, or this is not actually one of, using assessment and instruction might be another. So that might be something where when you do district PDs or school PDs, if we pick a particular school and looked at that, we could do this by a particular school. We could turn off all the schools and we'll just pick one of the schools, or Albion or something, and we can see for a particular school, Albion is pretty much in the all pink area, so we'll try another one in here. Let's try, see what we got in here. You can see in this one here, you can see where they fall to, where the strengths and weaknesses are for that particular school. So that gives you an idea, and you can again see this by the district or by a particular school or by groups of schools. You want to look at all of your high schools, you could pick that. Another example would be looking at the actual scores themselves. So now we're going and looking at the scores directly. So how are people doing? And again, you can filter these by school or by teacher, whichever way you're intending to look at these. And this one is actually a fairly large school district, although it doesn't have a lot of teachers in each of the schools. So you can see here, their particular workflow has an unannounced observation at the start of the year and then announced later. So you can see a lot of unannounced observations are done week 2 and 3, and you're just beginning to see the announced observations coming in. And you can see in here, if you wanted to take this data and do something else with it other than just look it on the screen, you have the ability to export it. And you can export it as an image to show it's on the screen. You can export the underlying data, which is a lot more information that's showing on the screen. You could export it as a crosstab. This is what people do an awful lot of, which is put it in Excel because they want to sort it some other way than what they're seeing on the screen. So you can do that. You can drop it right into Excel, and you can see the scores for individual teachers broken out this way in case you wanted to do some particular sorting or mathematics on it. And you can also take that same report and you could export it as a PDF file, choose everything in there, and then you could export that. So if you wanted to use things for presentations, you can bring them in as a PDF file, and then you can cut and paste those into PowerPoint if you want to talk about them in some sort of all building or all district meeting. And the other reports. Then we start looking at individual teachers. What about a particular teacher? How's an individual teacher doing? What can we talk to an individual teacher about that would give us a way of having a conversation that was more, this is how you're doing. So this is how the whole school district is doing here, right? But we could pick a particular teacher here. And let's see, I think Alva has some scores. We'll check. Oops, I lost that one. Sorry, I'm going to refresh this. This is something I'm working on fixing because it seems to be something sometimes our filters are going. I'm going to pick Alva.
Can I ask a question while you're trying to pull it up?
Yeah,
is this
here now. Yeah.
So is this DA role or what role?
Who's able to do this?
The role to have access to these reports, what role?
Okay, so there's essentially anyone who has evaluations, who's doing evaluations has access to these reports. If you aren't actively doing evaluations and you don't have evaluations assigned to you, then you need to have the role called district administrator. And the district administrator is somebody who can run these reports. And if you're a district administrator at the district level, you see everything for the district. If you're a district administrator at the building level, you see everything for the building. And the reason it's important to distinguish between those is in districts where, well, actually in states where there are administrative evaluations, generally the district people who get district administration rights are able to see all evaluations across the school district, but often the district administrator role in a school building is only given to the principal, because once you have that role, you can see all evaluations in the building, including the principals. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. So here's an example of a teacher. You can see where their strengths, they have all three, so that gives me no information, I guess. But in this situation, you could see that if they had strengths or weaknesses and we could find somebody who was better or worse, we could actually see color-coded here different where they stand across the board. I should have picked somebody else to find somebody who doesn't have all three, because it tells you not too much. Oh, you're just sitting along fine there. And then we could also look at a particular teacher and how they've done over time for observations and see what that looks like. And the first time this one pulls up, it's not the most elegant screen because it shows just about everybody in the school district, but then you can filter by teachers and see how they've progressed over time. So you can see that this is a lot of detail here, but we could try and pick a particular teacher. And I don't own this database, so I'll have to figure out if I can remember anybody who's done anything here. Let's see how Delphine's doing. See if we have anything for Delphine. Yeah, so Delphine has had one observation, and you can see what the scores are for that particular teacher. It occurred here, and if she had an additional observation, you would see those same bars going up and down. You'd see this and this. So that's that part of it. For what you would do with this information, I think that.
Sorry. Did we lose anybody?
Yep, we're good. Sorry, we just had someone drop off.
Okay.
We're okay.
The other thing that we can look at, and I'm not going to go into much of it, what do you do with all this information? And this is where we're seeing districts go either after they've done some walkthroughs or after they have some scores. They'll often go and say, hey, we're in Learn, right? You know, what kind of courses do we have available to me? Do I have available, whether it's related to the Common Core series, which we've loaded in. So we now have English and math. Let's say that was an initiative that you're looking at math. You could see what types of courses were available for math, or you could go in and say, I want to look at, we know this teacher has some strengths in some areas, but they're not very strong in certain areas of pedagogy. So we could pick something where we would look at particular strategies or competencies and say, okay, we want somebody to focus on. I think we said in this district we noticed that they weren't particularly strong in questioning, so we could go in and say, okay, fine, well, let's go in and let's watch a little video here on asking effective questions. So I know I went pretty fast, but you guys had me scheduled originally from 12 to 1, so I tried to get as close to 1:15 as I could. Any questions for me as far as where we're going? We have a lot of analytical reports to reflect. We are going to be trying to create those same types of reports that I showed you before over here for Focus and Learn through the spring and into the summer. So by next year, we'll have a full set for all of our products. And we are working on providing some other more sort of just granular data reports rather than analytical reports as part of the administrative tools that we'll be turning over later in the spring. What we've seen is this type of reporting is very helpful for analysis, but sometimes if people are just wanting to drop it into Excel, maybe it's better if we just give them the ability to get all the data in an Excel spreadsheet and they can take it someplace else. So we'll be providing those types of reports as part of our administrative tools later in the spring.
Excellent. So I would just like to ask one more question, and this was sort of asked, I guess, before, but those documents that you have that say available report for Focus, Reflect, and Learn, those are
Right.
really handy reports. And so I'm wondering, can you just confirm those are available now and you're going to give us information on how to locate those?
Sure. So these ones, let's just go back and look at some of those. So some of these you may not have turned on if you don't have the features turned on. So these top ones are available to the person who has the Focus Administrator role for your district.
Okay.
And those reports are run within the product. This one as well, you should be able to run within the product. This one here, you might not see calibration if you haven't implemented or turned on calibration in your system, and you might not see certification if you don't have recertification. So these ones, this is the part of what you think of as the basic Focus Observer training. This report gets turned on after you've turned on a calibration window. This would get turned on after you've done certification.
Okay.
As far as the Learn reports, again, there's somebody. I used to be a lot more expert in them than I am, so you've got me in my weaker area here. But I know that we have a nice listing of the reports and Learn that we can send you as to what their names are and what they actually do for you. Because I know there's an enormously long list of reports in there, many of which nobody uses because they're designed for when people are using Learn as a instructional. There's an ability to some of our customers have put in a whole other package that's attached to Learn where they're actually using the system to manage their own classroom-based instruction. And so some of those reports are related to that and not very relevant to you. These are the ones that are really relevant to you if you're using the content part of Learn. Okay. So I can see if I can get you a better translation of that because I understand there's a long list and they're not the easiest thing to find. And then you discover that they're quite browser dependent, which seems to be related to Crystal more than anything else.
Right, and I feel like that's kind of a starting point for professional development on how to use these. So
yeah, and that's what we're. So my goal is by this summer, I hope, because we have to get all the data out of Learn into our reporting database. And once we do that, we want to provide that same type of report that you're running reports on. Who's doing what are they doing? In a little bit more easy-to-use interface like this. That's a goal, is to provide those types of analytical reports. Focus is pretty good. I mean, they do give you some graphs and charts and stuff, but give you this type of report to Learn because we know people need it. They want to see something that says, here's this teacher, and then what are they doing with PD? And they want to do it quickly and not have to go between products that difficultly.
right.
So it is in the running. It's just we sort of follow the customer demand, and the demand was first for Reflect, and now it's becoming more and more for Learn.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks. Any
other questions?
No. All right, Allison. I think we are good then. We don't have any other questions. Does that wrap up what you have to present to us?
Yeah, was that useful to you? I mean, Pam just sort of gave me an open-ended talk to them about reporting. So
yeah, no, this is exactly what we were looking for, so that we can dive deeper. I wish we had a simulation where we could actually play with some test accounts, because this is, I think, the gap that we have in transferring the actual experience. Like there's a static slide presentation, and can actually mess with that data to actually feel good about what these reports look like when we go back to our districts. We were very fortunate for MPS. We have all the data here. We're messing around in these reports. We're like, oh yeah, this is a great PD. This would be a great PD. But it's I feel, you know, for our colleagues, it would probably be more meaningful. So just a little bit of feedback on that for test accounts to make this meaningful, because those reports, to help use those as a part of the conversation using the data is really beneficial as far as reaching our end goal, I think. So.
Okay, so that would be something that Pam could talk to your implementation people about, because I think every district is set up with one test principal and one test teacher. But those test principals and teachers may not be set up, they may not be getting access to the reports. I think that everybody has one of those. If they don't, I don't know who I'm trying to remember who your implementation person, because I know that Emily covered a lot of it, and I don't know who's doing that now, but
that person is Sean Ryan right now. He just took over for Emily, and Emily's still somewhat involved. So, yes, Sean Ryan would be the one that we would, and we're going to be meeting him. He's coming tonight to the facility, so we can talk with him about that.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, is there anything else? Otherwise, we'll say goodbye.
This is perfect, because Allison needed a hard stop at about 12:15 our time, so I think we're good. And we'll hopefully meet you all this evening, or late this afternoon. So.
Sounds great.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Allison, thank you very much. Have enjoy the rest of the weather.
It's sunny and blue. It's beautiful. Try to rub it in. It's over 40 now. Have a good one.
Oh, it's like 25 here. We're happy for you.
Right. No, I've been in the teens for a long time. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's spring. So have a great one. Thanks.
All right, you guys. Thanks again, Allison. Bye now.